All right. Welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relive with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your humble, gracious host, Richie Mars. Thank you for clicking on today's episode. And we're still in the midst of WrestleMania month, my favorite time of the year. We're on the road to WrestleMania. And this is going to be a fantastic WrestleMania topic about the 2 nights of WrestleMania. But before you do that, remember, always click the share button. Also, like everything that we do on the Instagram and on the TikTok at Retold Richie Mars, and on the X or the Twitter, whatever you want to say, at Retold Richie. But enough about me. You already know who I am. My guest today is a very special guest. I've been wanting this collaboration for months and months. Kept giving me the runaround because he's so busy for me. But it's all right because he is running not just a podcast, he's running a whole network of wrestling fans and content creators. Ryan from the North South Wrestling Connection, the leader of the CronoSo podcast. Ryan, thank you for joining me today.
Richie, what's going on, buddy? I had to clear my schedule to get here, but I am more than happy to be here. I cannot thank you enough for all of your input and all your contributions over at the North South the last 6 months or so. You've done a great job. And you really raise how water raises all ship, and you've been a part of that, Richie. So I'd like to thank you for all your contribute. Thank you for everything you've put in the last 6 months over there on the North South.
Thank you so much for having me on the No-So. But speaking of No-So, what is the No-So connection?
Well, really, it started with Wrestling Warzone, which is Chad and JT's podcast. That is the heartbeat of the network for sure, where they relive the Monday Night Wars. They are currently in 1997. They trucked through 95 and 96, but that was the thing that kind of was the offspring of it. Aaron George jumped on to The Wrestler That Was. That's an older series that you can go back and check on it. And then I jumped on with Justin and Chad, and we kind of just I put in a kind of a modern twist into things, and I'm gracious enough for them to bring me on and kind of help elevate everything up. And what we've done recently is we had CronoSo Daily, was 1985, 1986 WWE pay-per-view matches daily, but then we kind of twisted it into a monthly release or a bi-monthly release where we do every WrestleMania match in chronological order with a different reviewer on each match. And then I added, just cool segments throughout the 80s or whatever, from house shows and superstars and stuff like that. So it's really a truck through the 1980s into the 90s in a chronological order, and we're currently in 1989. And you were gracious enough to jump on that the last 6 months or so. And so the North South is like a nostalgia podcast network, pretty much, and we do definitely do some modern stuff. Marcus and Tim do viewers' choice pay-per-view reviews after every pay-per-view. I do pay-per-view previews on the YouTube channel. So we are a mixed bag of a lot of stuff. We have ECW stuff. We have old WCW stuff. We have everything. We have New Gen on a mission, which is New Generation. So there's a lot, Richie, I'm sure. And of course, Jenny has her day too. So there's a lot of old stuff, and it's a lot, but it's really fun. And there's definitely something on there for everyone. So that's my plug on that. I'd love, if you want to check out the North South Connection, YouTube, podcast, TikTok, everywhere.
All right. Make sure you guys check that out. But before we do, you got to listen to this gracious pod about a topic that Ryan picked, and that is if we made WrestleMania 32 through 35 2-night WrestleManias. Now, Ryan, what inspired this topic that we're going to be talking about today?
Oh boy. So it's 32 through 35 is such a bloated WrestleMania era, where we're in the network, WWE network phase, where the presidents of the network and Vince McMahon and all them think oversaturation of content is king. Hours of viewership is king. So we kind of get that within WrestleMania, where we get these 4.5 to 5 hours WrestleManias. And overall, it's a slog in real time. I attended most of those with my family. So it was just like, there's so much good into these WrestleManias, but once the pandemic hit and you got WrestleMania 36, especially 37, 38, and 39, just 2 days is such a perfect format for the bloat of WrestleMania. It doesn't feel as bloated. There's so much more room for digestion, and it doesn't feel like everything is just ham-fisted into one paper bag of a WrestleMania. So I was like, man, 32 to 35, let's just kind of help digest that flow of these matches and the flow of the structure of the card and make it 2 nights. And I thought that'd be a fun exercise to kind of do, Richie.
Yeah, and we've also had WrestleManias where things get cut or things get
Yes.
altered, like due to time.
Hmm.
There's going to be a WrestleMania episode in the future where me and my guest we talk about a WrestleMania match that we think got their time cut just by process of elimination. But before that, but even with a 2 night WrestleMania, we actually did have a match cut. So luckily, there was another night of WrestleMania to do that with the New Day and the Brawling Brutes when they got
Yeah.
cut from night one to and they got pushed to night two. So there's always a good thing in that regard. So on the topic of a 2 night WrestleMania, like you said, it's easier to digest, it's easier to process. Are there any cons of a 2 night WrestleMania, in your opinion?
Perhaps to a casual fan, it's 2 nights of investment. You get the one night and it's just like, all right, well, maybe I'm a casual fan. I want to go over my friend's house. He has WrestleMania. Um, it's not like you have to order it anymore. It is $5 to $10, so it's not that big of a financial commitment. But from a time commitment, you're looking at 5 hours each night, perhaps if you want to take in the pre-shows. But that's probably better than the 6 hours of a one night taken where everything's more digestible. So the con would probably be the weekend investment instead of the one night investment. But I don't really, and if you're a ticket goer, definitely financially, you're buying 2 tickets opposed to one now. So I think those are probably the cons off the top of my head. But overall, I'm more pro than con on this 2 night.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I do prefer the 2 night WrestleMania just because, like you said, like stimulation wise, you're not getting everything thrown at you at once. Like it's almost like everyone was like fighting for a spot on the card. And unfortunately, some of these WrestleMania matches might have underdelivered due to those time cuts and stuff. But another important topic that it's been a big discussion in WrestleMania are the two main events, the night one main event and the night two main event. In your opinion, is there a how will I phrase it? Is there a difference between being the night one main event and the night two main event? Does one seem more prestigious than the other?
Yeah, by happenstance, it kind of does, but I still think the prestige of the night one WrestleMania will live up in aura wise. But let's kind of look at it real quick. So night one WrestleMania in 36, we had the Boneyard match. It was a buzz, right? You had that epic cinematic match. It was different, of course. It's the first cinematic match we kind of watched in real time, but it was a success, right? So it was like, all right, Undertaker's career is over. Night one, wow, that was really cool. It was a kind of like a movie presentation, so it didn't really have that weird empty arena feel. And then night two, it's like, oh wow, Drew won in 4.5 minutes, and it was just like a bomb fest, and it was like a 2.5 or 2 star whatever. And that was what it was for Drew. It was like that's what it was at an empty arena. So it was just like, yeah, night one WrestleMania felt awesome. Night two felt like a letdown. Then 37, you had the awesome Bianca Belair moment. A star is born, really. And it was a cool moment, and Sasha Banks did the job, and it was just like, wow, that was cool. So that's 2 years in a row where you're coming off WrestleMania night one, looking forward to night two, and it was a monster success. And then WrestleMania 38, you had the epic, or WrestleMania 37 night two, you had the epic three-way, and it was just like, wow, back-to-back WrestleMania main events really added to the aura of WrestleMania 37. So two successful main events, awesome. 38, you had the Stone Cold moment. Again, it's kind of like 37, rolling into 38. Night two, it was a success, home run. And then you had the 38 main event where Gentlemen's Three, they did their thing. It was a good main event, but perhaps Roman got hurt and they kind of cut it short, went home, kind of little anticlimactic, so to speak. So it was kind of a mess, let's be real. And then last year, unbelievable. The Bloodline night one with the Usos, awesome moment with KO and Sammy. And then you had the Roman Reigns. Oh my God, Cody Rhodes didn't finish the story. He got screwed. But it was a successful main event for sure, I would say. So 4 for 4 night one WrestleManias, I would say. And then night two, I'd probably say 2 for 4
Mhm.
overall on the equation standpoint. So yeah, either way, night one WrestleMania is doing its job to continue the buzz into night two. So I like the night two, of course, you have the prestige of you're closing the WrestleMania, but the night one does its job of continuing the flow. And I think it is prestigious enough. It's just kind of like an A minus WrestleMania main event, let's so to speak, from a historical standpoint. Let's put it that way.
The WrestleMania 2 main event is definitely the more marquee of the two main events, but it
Yes.
seems like the night one WrestleMania main event is more of the workhorse main event,
Yeah.
if
Good
that
point.
makes any sense. Because you had AJ Styles being the main event, you had Uso, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, a returning
Yep.
Steve Austin. All those WrestleManias felt bigger. The Bianca Belair Sasha Banks match was definitely a culmination of where women's wrestling was in comparison to back,
Yep.
like even not even like 5-10 years ago. So the importance of the WrestleMania main event of night one has really evolved certain stars to be looked at in a different light. Now it's quote unquote easier to be the night one main event or night two main event now because there are more spots open, but that weight of being a WrestleMania main eventer is still there and it still means something more. And I personally think it might mean more to be a WrestleMania main eventer than it does to be like a world champion or WWE champion to some degree. But
Yeah.
enough of the pros and the cons of night one and night two WrestleMania. Let's go on to our first WrestleMania, and this is WrestleMania 32 from Dallas, Texas. So I'm going to say the card. You're going to just let me know your reactions on the WrestleMania as a whole, what went right with it, what went wrong with it, and what matches you would have open and close each night, and other matches that you would put on either night. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, so we're going to start with the pre-show, which was Kalisto defending his United States Championship against Ryback. Then we had the Total Divas and versus Team Bad and Blonde on the pre-show. Then we had Usos versus the Dudley Boys, and now we're on the main card with the ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship, where Zack Ryder defeated Kevin Owens, Dolph Ziggler, The Miz, Sami Zayn, Sin Cara, and Stardust. Then we had Chris Jericho defeating AJ Styles, the League of Nations defeating the New Day in a six-man tag. Then we had Brock Lesnar and Dean Ambrose in the no holds barred street fight. Then we had Charlotte Flair becoming the inaugural WWE Women's Champion, defeating Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks. Then you had that Hell in a Cell match with Undertaker and Shane McMahon, Baron Corbin winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, The Rock defeating Eric Rowan in that lovely classic match. And then, of course, we had Roman Reigns defeat Triple H for the WWE Championship. Now, I remember watching this on the network and being very overwhelmed, yet, like you said, with this card, because on paper, a lot of these matches seemed very well put together. You know, the builds were solid, but this was one of those WrestleManias where they were snake bitten by injuries. You know, John Cena was on, um, was injured. Randy Orton was injured. Cesaro was injured. It just seemed like a lot of people were injured. Seth Rollins was injured. So this was definitely a snake bitten WrestleMania. What were your thoughts on this WrestleMania overall?
It's definitely a lower tier WrestleMania in retrospect, but during the live watching of it, I felt like it was fine, but I definitely felt that it was missing the star power and the prestige, and the show flow was kind of very slow. Like The Rock was in a 6 minute match. It was impromptu, but the segment was 45 minutes. Like, like really? Like that's just, especially so late into the card. It just felt like that was unnecessarily could have been cut extremely heavily. The main event, 27 minutes. That just feels extremely long, especially that late in the card, especially with a aging Triple H and a Roman Reigns that was maybe not the Roman Reigns of today. That just felt like if they went with a home run epic sprint of a 10-minute squash in a way, that felt like it would have aged this WrestleMania much more better. But the final two things there, and then you add in the 30-minute Shane McMahon fake MMA, bad looking MMA with The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell. Again, that should have been shorter. So that final three of a big epic matches, the Rock segment wasn't an epic match, but an epic segment, felt like if it was cut in half or it was spread across two nights, would have definitely improved a WrestleMania 32 card that wasn't too bad on the undercard. The IC ladder match was a really good epic ladder match in a way. League of Nations was fun, especially with you add in all the surprises at the end with the legends. You had the inaugural women's match, which was historically delivered well. And then like the fun stuff with Brock and Ambrose, it was fine. It was a miss, but it was fine. Like in a way, it was fine, but it was mostly a miss. And then the Jericho AJ match should have been better, but it is what it is. So all that being said, the WrestleMania 32 was fine. Should have been better in a way.
All right, now, well, hypothetically, the WWE gives you the okay. WrestleMania 32 is going to be a 2-night WrestleMania. What do you do for night one? What's the opener and what's the closer?
All right, so I'm still opening with this ladder match, and I am closing with actually Shane and Undertaker. The build probably warrants a main event here. I would definitely cut it. I wouldn't go 30 minutes with it. And I would definitely kind of add a little more smoke and mirrors to it to kind of help pace an aging Undertaker and a bad looking Shane McMahon offense. But you can't deny that spot off the top of the ladder or off the top of the cage. That was definitely memorable, but they probably should have got it to it quicker. And if that's main eventing in night one, which we talked about earlier, has delivered and helped the flow of matches, I think that would have helped the flow of that for sure.
All right, now I got half of yours from my end. I do agree that Taker and Shane should have been the night one Hell in a Cell main event. But for me, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the little traditionalist in me, but I had the ladder match as the night two opener just because I feel weird kind of bookending two specialty matches on the same card. I don't know why. It's just like one of those things where I'm just like, if there's a ladder match and a Hell in a Cell match, I'm just like, oh, we're at Extreme Rules right now, or we're at One Night Stand or something. So it's just like one of my preference. I actually have Chris Jericho and AJ opening up night one at that
Funny you have
WrestleMania.
that.
So
yeah, it's funny you have that because I have them opening night too.
all right, here we go, and let's go to that night two. So we got AJ and Chris Jericho on night two for you, and the main event I assume is going to be Triple H defending against Roman Reigns.
Yes, it is. I still stick with because the entrances are cool, right? You get the Stephanie stuff, the NXT extras, and all the skull helmets and whatnot. So I thought the entrance worked, but at the 5-hour mark, it just wasn't working. So perhaps at like the 3-hour mark of night or the 2.5-hour mark of night two, I think that works better. But I don't go 30 minutes. I probably go 12 to 15 in a super sprint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the definition of this main event could have been an email a little bit because a lot of people were kind of, I wouldn't say, well, they were sick of Roman, but if you remember when Sheamus was champion and Roman took the title off Sheamus, they were behind Roman a little bit, but then it became the McMahon family versus Roman story. And then you had Roman
Yeah,
being written off from like I think he had like a nose surgery or something like that. He had something done, so he was written off
I'm
TV
not.
for a part of the build. But another match that was interesting to me, I'm not sure if you remember this or not. The League of Nations and New Day 6-man tag match was originally supposed to be for the WWE Tag Team Championships. They had the graphic on the website that it was going to be for the tag titles, and then a day or two before, that graphic was no go. So for me, being that little smarty fan at the time, was being like, okay, so that means the New Day is probably losing because I don't see them dropping the titles at WrestleMania if that was the case. And this was actually the League of Nations final match as a collective unit before Barrett would be ousted from WWE until he came back for commentary. What was your
Yeah,
favorite League of Nations match?
probably this one. It definitely wasn't the Rumble where like McMahon recruited them all to take out Roman, and that was a big clusterfuck. But yeah, it was
No,
probably this one.
it did have
Yeah, I
it
had
did have
this match.
Rusev just like take the monitor in the back too. He just stole
Oh,
the television monitor after putting Reigns through the table.
yeah, I don't know. That was a very weird time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had this third on day one. I had Total Divas and Bad and Blonde right before this,
Mhm.
bringing that from the pre-show to the main show. And I still do the same thing. I do the awesome energy with New Day entrance, and then I do have the moment with I have this early on the card because I still include the moment with Triple H. I mean, excuse, I have the moment with Stone Cold Mick Foley and the Texas legend himself, Shawn Michaels, beat up the League of Nations and then stun the New Day afterward. So it sounds like they took the tag titles off the card because they wanted to. Don't mind you, that was in the middle of their historical tag team run,
Yeah,
so they
that's
kind of
right.
wanted to kind of keep that going, and they felt that maybe perhaps the League of Nations needed to win this match for some reason. I don't know.
Mhm. Now, of course, we need to talk about the, I guess, controversial match of the night, and that's the Brock Lesnar Dean Ambrose match, with the build being Dean Ambrose getting all these hardcore weapons of choice from the different legends, and didn't really use any of them. And of course, we would later found out that Brock Lesnar was preparing for a UFC return, so
Yep.
that's probably why Brock didn't want to go too crazy. And Dean even said in an interview after he left WWE that he wanted to mace Brock Lesnar right off the jump, and he couldn't find Brock until right before the show, and Brock okayed it to happen, but Dean couldn't find anybody to approve the spot in time. So, unfortunately, we didn't
Oh, interesting.
get that mace like moment for Brock and Dean. And this match was originally not supposed to happen. It was supposed to be
Mhm.
Brock Lesnar versus Bray Wyatt. Now, for whatever reason, some or another, some say that Brock Lesnar was uninterested in working with a guy who's out there as Wyatt creatively. Others say Bray did have an injury going into WrestleMania, which is why they did the pivot to Dean Ambrose and Brock Lesnar. And a lot of people responded well towards that match in general. What night did you think this match should have been on, and what would you do if Brock Lesnar didn't get that call from UFC and he was allowed to go balls to the wall? Do you think he would have done a little bit more, or do you think the match would probably stay as is?
I think Brock probably would have, maybe lowered his guard a little bit, and I think with Brock and Dean, I ultimately kind of think that Brock didn't necessarily respect Dean in a way, or Ambrose, or whoever, to a point to kind of let his guard down and go out there and have a garbage match, so to speak.
Mhm.
And he had more of a safe PG garbage match. I love that Mace idea. That would have been pretty cool, and then probably added to the psychology of the match too, where the undersized Dean is kind of attacking Brock more violently and more easily or whatever way. So that is pretty cool. But I have I have this match third actually right after the New Day match. I'm kind of continuing on here. Richie, have you seen my list? But anyways, it is disappointing for what it could have been, but for what it is, it's fine enough, I think, to kind of continue a decent card here as we go.
And the last big match that I really want to talk about is the inaugural Women's Championship match, that triple threat match between Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha. And a lot of people have been clamoring for that four horsewomen fatal four way. And as we're going to get to in the later WrestleMania, we keep having like almost misses with actually happening, that match happening. Now, as a triple threat match, you had the Snoop Dogg entrance with Sasha Banks. I had this on my WrestleMania night 2, just to kind of
Yeah.
differentiate a little. You do like the title reveal they did on the pre-show on night 1, and then you have the match on night 2, and Charlotte winning, which was a lot of people thought was a head scratcher at the time because she was coming in as the Divas champion, and then she's just kind of continuing. Do you think Charlotte was the right call here, and what did you think about this triple threat match overall as an elevation of the women's division?
Well, Charlotte early on at WrestleMania kind of must pose, right? So she was probably the diva they had the most investment in at the time. So to give her the inaugural women's belt, I kind of feel was the right move in retrospect. So I was okay with it. I'm more of a Charlotte fan than most probably. So maybe that I have rose colors glasses with that, but I think she is definitely the right woman in retrospect to kind of go with at this time as the inaugural women's quote unquote champion. I felt that I felt that Sasha perhaps was probably the fan favorite at the time to get this spot. And Becky did kind of feel kind of forced a little bit into this match, but in retrospect from history, it kind of feels that of course she's in this match, as she's probably the biggest star coming out of the three at the time nowadays, anyways. But at the time, she definitely didn't feel like she was on par with these two women at the time.
Mhm. I definitely agree with that. With Becky, just kind of seemed forced in there, not for any reason other than to take the fall, because they didn't probably want
Yeah.
to beat Sasha at that time, and then we were preparing for the great Sasha Banks Charlotte Flair feud later on in the year. Now, as we're wrapping up WrestleMania 32, what are your final thoughts? Any matches that you think specifically should have happened on either night?
Well, this was a hard spot because we had so many injuries, like you alluded to earlier.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. It's kind of weird spot looking at the cards. I wouldn't really reshake anything to mix anything up necessarily. In retrospect, having Bailey in that women's match would have been pretty cool, but I understand that she's not even on. She's in NXT, kind of finishing her NXT storylines there. So historically, it would have been cool to have a horsewomen fatal four way, but I guess for what it was at the time, that's fine. But I don't know if I would have really shooken anything necessarily up and done anything different. How about you, Richie?
Not really. Like in terms of people winning and the winners of the match, it just seems like everyone won was the right call. You got Roman winning, starting his reign, no pun intended. You have Taker winning in that weird storyline with the lockbox. And if Taker loses, then he's not allowed to be in WrestleMania. And then if Shane wins, he gets control of WWE. Even though he lost, he then got control the next night. It was just like a lot of storyline logic gaps for me. But in terms of matches and where they should be, I think everything worked out the way it should have been. But let's fast
Yeah.
forward to WrestleMania 33, which is in Orlando, Florida, which I'm reading right now, just so I don't mix up Dallas and Houston ever again. So let's go over the card. So we're in the pre-show right now. For the Cruiserweight Championship, we got Neville defending against Austin Aries. Then we got the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal with Mojo Rawley last eliminating Jinder Mahal. That's going to be important for this year in a bit because we're in 2017, and 2017 is the year of Jinder Mahal. Then we had a surprising match on the pre-show, in my opinion. It's Dean Ambrose defeating Baron Corbin to retain the Intercontinental Championship. Then we're off the pre-show. We got AJ Styles against Shane McMahon. Then we got Kevin Owens defeating Chris Jericho for the U.S. Championship. We got Bayley in a fatal four-way elimination match, retaining her Raw Women's Championship over Charlotte Flair, Nia Jax, and Sasha Banks. Then we had the fatal four-way tag team ladder match with the Hardys' surprise return, defeating Luke Gallows, Carl Anderson, Sheamus and Cesaro, and Enzo and Big Cass. Then we had the mixed tag match with John Cena and Nikki Bella defeating The Miz and Maurice. Then you had the unsanctioned match with Seth Rollins defeating Triple H with his own move, the pedigree. Then we have the WWE Championship match, that laser light show of different insects and creepy imagery of Randy Orton defeating Bray Wyatt. Then you had Brock Lesnar defeat Goldberg in that epic Universal Championship match that only lasted 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Then you have Naomi winning the six-pack challenge for the SmackDown Women's Championship against Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, Carmella, Mickie James, and Natalya. And then the main event, the no-holds-barred match with Roman Reigns defeating The Undertaker. 13 matches in total. I'm exhausted just reading them, and we still have a couple more WrestleManias to go. With this WrestleMania, was it a step up from 32 in your opinion?
Yes, the roster is a little more healthy, so to speak. So we have a lot more depth to work with. Um, it seems like Roman Reigns is kind of still in the same spot. So it's just like we're still Roman Reigns season. We got to make him. Let's put him against one of our legends from the past. And he is not in the title match whatsoever, but he's still a focal point of this WrestleMania. So Roman must pose season is still definitely a thing here. But we could have transitioned into off of Roman Reigns, or a Roman Reigns character definitely should have transitioned coming out of this show, but it doesn't. But anyways, that's for another day.
Mhm.
But yeah, so structure wise, it's still company from a company standpoint. Structure wise, we're still in Roman Reigns season, like blah big dog Roman Reigns season. So it's kind of like still a from a top standpoint, we're kind of still stuck in the mud a little bit, but from a depth standpoint, we are definitely cooking with much more gas opposed from 32.
Mm. Now, for your night one opener and main event, what do you have?
Richie, believe it or not, I am opening with the Andre Memorial Battle Royal. I thought it was a pretty good Andre, so to speak. I thought there was plenty of star power in there with Sammy and Braun Strowman, and I liked the Rob Gronkowski angle. Of course, I sprint through it. I don't really go the full 15 minutes or whatever, but Jinder Mahal is such an important thing coming forward, and Mojo could have really been made, and the Gronkowski appearance was pretty important in a way from a from an eyeball standpoint where I think this is safe enough to kind of open WrestleMania, but we kind of work our way through it quicker. So I actually open with that.
Interesting. I have AJ Styles and Shane McMahon still going on first for night one.
I have that down the card, so to speak. So yeah, I have definitely having a wild card out there, but from an eyeballs and a standpoint and a mainstream, I'm sticking to my guns, Richie.
Yeah, future 24/7 champion Rob Gronkowski making his WWE debut.
Future WrestleMania host. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of investment there with Rob, and I think that we could have gotten the same result opening it here.
And what do you have as your night one main event?
Oh, buddy, this one's perfect. This is Goldberg versus Brock for the Universal title. This is everything that the year before Night 2 WrestleMania main event should have been with Triple H and Roman Reigns. I would have that same structure. At 4 minutes and 45 seconds, these guys went out there and had a bomb fest. And yeah, I absolutely love this. And I would roll this into Night 2 with this closing Night 1 with that Universal title match for sure.
And I definitely agree with that sentiment. I do think Brock Lesnar and Goldberg had a barn burner of a match, a quick match. Didn't need to be anything else like that. Like you were saying with the Triple H Roman Reigns match. If it was like on a fast forward button, this would probably be where the match was just finisher spam, just as fast as you can, get in, get out. No one gets hurt except for Goldberg because that's what happens when you lose the championship. So going down the card here and just looking at the card overall, let's talk about the Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho match because they had the best feud probably heading into this WrestleMania. They get on the card second on the main show, and there were rumors, and Jericho said that Vince McMahon said that they would be in the spot for the Universal Championship. Obviously, they went with the U.S. Championship instead, which is fine. But when you have the best story on the show, usually you'd like to have the main title to kind of bookend that rivalry, and then later down the line, Chris Jericho would drop it to Brock Lesnar in the next month. Did you think that would have been the better alternative, or do you think the Goldberg Brock Lesnar match needed the championship?
In the current time, I definitely thought that the Universal title deserved the feud that was broiling up between KO and Jericho because pretty much Jericho was his lackey for 6 to 8 months leading up to this as he was champion, saving him in certain spots and really establishing him as a top guy because Jericho definitely has that luster and aura of the time of main event status, of course, but especially being a legend in a way, so to speak, but giving KO a boost to kind of continue that title reign where KO was kind of a vulnerable heel champion as he was getting established as a character. So I definitely thought that the payoff warranted a better story for KO than what we got from the month before with Fastlane. But from a marquee standpoint and how the Goldberg and the Brock Universal match delivered and how the KO and Jericho match necessarily didn't deliver as it should, I felt in retrospect that the Universal title being on Brock and Goldberg kind of did work, unfortunately, in a way. But in real time, I was definitely team KO and Jericho being the Universal Championship match at the time, especially with that awesome Festival of Friendship moment that we got to. That blow off to that feud, or really what kicked off the feud here for WrestleMania, that's like an all-time segment for the company. I stand by that sentiment all day, every day.
Now, Vince McMahon told Kevin Owens apparently this was the worst WrestleMania match of all time. Now you're counting down every WrestleMania match on TikTok at CronoSo Connection. Was this the worst WrestleMania match of all time, in your opinion?
No. No, this was, let's just put it, this was like a gentleman's 3-star match. This was fine, but the slotting of it being third on the card behind, the 3 pre-show matches and right behind, or no, excuse me, this was second on the card, right behind the awesome AJ and Shane match, kind of definitely hurt it. The crowd was so high with DeAndre and Gronk, and it continued opening the show into AJ and Shane, where they kind of had a letdown spot here on this match. So, yeah, it was kind of hampered by the crowd reaction, but perhaps the layout was too mat based because this feud was definitely heated, and you could have had a little more spunk and a little more of KO style opposed to the Jericho Mat Classic. Because Jericho in WrestleMania, let me tell you, that guy is constantly chasing a Ricky Dragon Steamboat Macho Man match, where that is his favorite match, and he kind of went out there every time to try to have a Mat Classic at a WrestleMania, and he never really got that feat. So perhaps if he went out there and had more of a brawling style, the crowd would have been more engaged, because that's the type of feud that these guys would have, like kind of like a blood feud,
Yeah,
so to speak. So
maybe a more
the
AEW
structure hurt this
Jericho.
match.
Yeah, maybe more
Yeah.
AEW Jericho, because Jericho nowadays is more of a brawler than anything else
Yes.
than he is
And
currently.
that's KO style all day,
Hmm.
for sure. So
Now,
structure and style definitely hurt the feud here.
yeah,
The match, excuse me, definitely hurt the match because they didn't live up to the feud.
yeah, they would later have better matches. Like I believe they had one in Payback that was great. They had one in SmackDown that wrote Jericho off. That was great. So they do have that chemistry. It's
Yes.
just a matter of, like you said, time, placement, everything like that. Now let's fast forward to your night 2. What do you have opening, and what do you have closing?
I have that very good Shane McMahon AJ style match we talked about earlier. I have that opening night 1. In closing, I still go with Roman versus The Undertaker. Perhaps I don't know, maybe if we're on 2 nights, The Undertaker can maybe have more rest. He's not standing around before this waiting to go out. But I don't know what happened. He just wasn't on his game today, and we had a still kind of green main Roman Reigns in a way, where he kind of struggled when The Undertaker wasn't really up to par that night. So it was definitely like a big miss in a swing, but maybe perhaps on a 2 nights of a WrestleMania, they would have a better structure or a better layout. But I don't know. This was just a real big swing and a miss.
Yeah, I do have that as my main event for night 2, and to open the show, I actually have the first match, not only on the show, just the pre-show in general. I have Neville defending against Austin Aries. Getting some little cruiserweight action up there. If we're
I
doing
do
us
have that
two,
on night 2 too. Yeah.
just to this was Austin Aries' kind of like a debut pay-per-view with the company. He was the 205 live commentator for a bit. Suggesting every
Hmm.
match ends with a thumb to the eye, which is probably my favorite gimmick at the time, where they would ask Austin Theory, Austin, how would you react in this situation? He's like, oh, thumb to the eye. That's all you need. I'm like, all right, there we go. But now that we're in this WrestleMania, we are not talking about probably the most memorable moment of the entire WrestleMania,
Yes.
and that is the Hardy Boys' return match. Which night would you put this on WrestleMania? Do you start off the first WrestleMania strong with the Hardy Boys return, or do you wait till night 2?
I wait till night 2. I wait till night 2. So night 1, I go Andre, Raw, US, Miz and Maurice, Triple H unsanctioned into the Goldberg match. So I kind of put my heavy, my workhorses matches that were pretty decent. But then I go night 2, I go AJ, Shane, Neville, Corbin, and then I give us the Hardy surprise right smack in the middle of the night 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I kind of lull us down a little bit with the IC and the cruiserweight matches leading into the big Hardy Boys, because everyone anticipated this moment. I start hot on night 2 with WrestleMania with the Styles match, and then I kind of bring us down a little bit with 2 good matches. But man, the crowd is ready for it, and as I was there in the crowd, and we were ready for it. It was buzzing when the new day came out right after the 3 teams had their matches, their entrances for the ladder match. The New Day came out, and we're like, oh, okay. And they did such a perfect job of presenting the Hardy Boys. We're like, this is a fatal 4-way. And then they started taking off their gear, and but the who. And then when that, Richie, let me tell you, when that fucking Hardy Boys music hits, I still get goosebumps thinking about it being there. It was a all-time reaction. And that's where the sometimes in these arenas, the reaction gets hurt because the noise leaves the arena, because the arena's empty and it's so big. But man, I still feel the rumbles. I still felt that reaction, and it was an all-time WrestleMania moment. So I put that smack in the middle of day 2. How about you?
Now,
Where'd you have it?
Now, I also had it on day two, just because
Okay.
you want to build that reaction, you want to build that uh, anticipation, because the Hardys, there were always rumors, but Jeff Hardy kept saying in interviews like, "Oh, we're not going, we're not going." Then they would post on social media, it's like, "Oh, thanks for having us in Orlando," and then they finally got snuck in. The only thing is, then this would go to history. Would that get leaked out? And that would be the only hesitation I have putting it on night two. But the reason why I feel like it would work on night two is
Yeah, good point.
just like you said, just got to build that anticipation, really get that boost to the WrestleMania night card, and also to kind of compensate for the unfortunate Roman Reigns Undertaker match, which again, Undertaker was on his last legs, unfortunately. And a fun fact about that WrestleMania with the Hardy Boys return, when they had the pyro going off, that was actually supposed to be Kurt Angle's pyro, because they announced all the Hall of Famers that were going, and Kurt was supposed to get the pyro, but the Hardy Boys got the pyro instead.
They hit the wrong button too early.
No, not even that. The Vince just went with the call, saying, "Oh, they deserve the pyro," and Kurt's like, oh, what? Come on, you know."
So that's
So
two. He would screw him twice. We'll
now,
get to that later.
yep. Yeah. Would you? What other things do you have to say about this WrestleMania? Is there anything else that you would like to say about it? Would you like to talk about that lovely Randy Orton Bray Wyatt projection match, or let's leave that
Yeah.
better said than done?
I would just put that right after the Hardys match, so it would definitely be forgotten about, and I would not put the bugs on the ground or the mat. That's all time bad. If you want to rewind our WrestleMania countdown, that is in the 390s, very very low,
All right, now let's
all
fast
time bad moment.
let's fast forward to WrestleMania 34, a very controversial WrestleMania. Well, how would you compare WrestleMania 34 to 32 and 33? Of course, we're in New Orleans this time around.
Again, I was there live. I actually prefer this to them the first two we talked about. I think
Oh,
this has sneaky good stuff in it for sure, but you definitely feel the bloat as we enter the 14 match territory.
oh.
So the bloat, it's like, man, we're eating extra chicken fingers at dinner and we're getting bloated and more bloated as we get on. And here they are stuffing, like they think that hours of wrestling is just perfect for the network, and we are feeling it here at WrestleMania for sure. But there's definitely more good in WrestleMania 34 than in WrestleMania 33 and 32, in my opinion.
Mhm. There's a lot of good things, and let's go down the card, shall we? Let's go down the card, shall we? Easy for me to say. So we got Matt Hardy winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. We have Cedric Alexander defeating Mustafa Ali to win the vacant Cruiserweight Championship. You have Naomi winning the WrestleMania Women's Battle Royal, which was initially named the Fabulous Moolah Battle Royal, Memorial Battle Royal, and then Snickers threatened to pull out, and yeah, we got the name change right there. Then we go on to the main card: Seth Rollins defeating The Miz and Finn Balor in a triple threat match for the Intercontinental Championship. You got Charlotte Flair retaining over Asuka for the SmackDown Women's Championship. You got the Fatal 4-Way match for the United States Championship: Jinder Mahal defeating Randy Orton, Bobby Roode, and Rusev. Then you got the mixed tag team match of Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey defeating Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. Then you got the Bludgeon Brothers defeating the Usos and the New Day in a triple threat tag team match for the SmackDown tag titles. You have The Undertaker defeating John Cena in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Then you got Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon defeating Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in a tag match. Then you have Nia Jax defeating Alexa Bliss for the Raw Women's Championship. You got AJ Styles retaining the WWE Championship over Shinsuke Nakamura. Then you got Braun Strowman and Nicholas defeating the Bar for the tag team titles. And then you have Brock Lesnar shockingly retaining his Universal Championship over Roman Reigns. So, like you said, 14 matches. That was a lot. I also have a book. It's called the Creating WrestleMania, and they followed this particular WrestleMania. And there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff they discussed in there. That's a WWE published book, so I know this is in fact legit. So I'm gonna say a couple of things, and you're gonna give me your reactions in real time. So
Good.
with Seth Rollins defeating The Miz and Finn Balor, originally Finn Balor, the pitched opponent for him was gonna be Kane, because a couple of Raws before, Kane actually defeated Finn Balor cleanly, which would set up that Demon versus Demon match. Demon Kane versus Demon Balor, with Balor getting his win back. And unfortunately, we never got that win back because Kane was unfortunately injured before that even happened. Rusev was entered in the United States Championship match because he was oh so popular. And it
Yep.
still boggles my mind. They haven't really done anything with him. Not in the book, but Seth Rollins pitched to Vince McMahon to make him the Intercontinental Championship and have a run of a lifetime, which he did.
Yep.
The Kurt Angle Ronda Rousey match, originally Braun Strowman was going to be in the Kurt Angle position.
Woof.
Then we saw in the documentary with The Undertaker that he was preparing for a 30-minute classic with John Cena, but he was given 3 minutes instead. Say it ain't so.
Wow.
Then we had the Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon match. Shane, remember, he had that helicopter fall, and then he had that bout with, I believe it was diverticulitis.
Diverticulitis. Yeah.
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 And originally, Chris Jericho was called to see if he could make it. And if he wasn't going to get called, Dolph Ziggler would have been the one to replace Shane McMahon.
Oh, interesting.
And then there was a talk of the original match Kurt Angle was supposed to have was with Jason Jordan. Because if you remember, Jason Jordan was Kurt Angle's son. And it was going to build up into a father versus son match at that WrestleMania. But unfortunately, Jason Jordan was not cleared in time. But he's doing a fantastic job as producers. Now, out of all of those, is there anything that really does shock you?
Strowman just doesn't feel like it would have fit, but what he did at WrestleMania is repulsive. No offense, Nicholas.
Yeah. A fun thing is Tanahashi was actually in the crowd because he was supporting Shinsuke Nakamura. And when Braun Strowman said, "Raise your hand if you want to be my tag partner," Tanahashi was throwing his hand up and hopefully wanted to get picked.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I mentioned that in our countdown. We had this we had this very, very low, Richie. Spoiler. Now, interesting. Dolph Ziggler at the time, he had that. He's in a weird spot on SmackDown. So him kind of getting in that spot was interesting as like the third string backup idea. I do recall the Jericho stuff, so that would have worked too if Shane wasn't ready. But yeah, that interesting behind the scenes stuff there for sure. And if 30 minutes for the Undertaker and Cena, of course, the 2.5 minutes was disappointing for what it was, but to give them 30 just feels like, how does that fit? Like, how would have that fit on this bloated card? That seems like we would have had to cut a lot.
Now, what is your opener and closer for night one?
Yes. So my night one opener is I stick to the guns. I go the triple threat. I see Finn, Rollins, and Miz. And my closer, I wonder if this is going to be a surprise to you, Richie. It is going to be Triple H and Stephanie versus Ronda Rousey and Kurt Angle. I thought that match was an absolute home run. I thought that it was laid out perfectly. Mind you, Ronda Rousey feels like the biggest star at the time. I was in New Orleans. She was over like Rover. She doesn't, and historically, her main eventing night one of WrestleMania would have added to the main event of WrestleMania 35 for sure. So I think this is the safest spot, the best match on the card, perhaps, to kind of main event night one.
I had exactly that. I had the IC opening and I had the mixed tag closing because the mixed tag arguably stole the show to many people. I think that was the top 2 or 3 match, along with the women's SmackDown Women's Championship match and the Triple Threat Intercontinental Championship match.
Yes.
For night 2, I want to see if we're on the same page here. I still have Roman and Brock as the main event, but for the opener, I have, and people might get angry at me, but it's my list. You can do what you want with it. I have the WWE Championship match with AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. And the reason for that is, if they're not going on last, you want to go first, because that's when the crowd is hyped. That's when they're peaked. And I think a lot of the qualms we have with the AJ Styles Shinsuke Nakamura match was it was put on when the crowd was near exhaustion. And it should never be like that in a WrestleMania. And these two deserved a little bit more of a showcase. But at the same time, their feud was just kind of beginning at this WrestleMania, which is weird because WrestleMania is usually the culmination of all
Yeah.
these stories, but their story was just beginning. But you kick off night 2 with that, and then you hit them with that heel turn. The rest of the night is in flux. Now you're thinking, oh, what's going to happen? Now, what was your night 2 like, Ryan?
So my night 2 is the same Roman Reigns. Well, not the same. The same main event. Roman
Mm,
Reigns versus Brock, which is kind of underratedly a shocking main event that we forget about. We had the blood, we had the bomb fest, a little bit too bomby, but the blood and the bomb fest for in the middle of this PG era was
mm,
kind of like a interesting, and yeah, of course a very surprising winner too with Brock Lesnar, because this is definitely Roman Reigns must pose season for sure.
mm,
And the opener, I'm going Charlotte Flair and Asuka. I thought this was the best match behind the
mm,
mixed tag. And I
mm.
want to continue that momentum that we got the night before into Asuka and Charlotte opening night 2.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Were you shocked that Asuka, her undefeated streak ended at this WrestleMania?
Well, back to WrestleMania 32, Charlotte must pose, right? And in retrospect, Charlotte is the first woman to main event a WrestleMania. So no, I can definitely see why they did that. You know, if you think of Triple H, oh, excuse me, if you think of Brock Lesnar ending the Undertaker streak, and you think of all, you know, it's an investment in a star that we have. Charlotte is the biggest. They present her as the biggest star, definitely at this time. So yeah, I think that it warrants it, and historically, I think it's totally fine.
All right. Any other words you have for WrestleMania 34? Do you think we're on the right track of these bloated WrestleManias?
Yeah, I actually have Nakamura and Styles the semi main to night 1. I think with the feud continuing, it's a good spot to present it as the second to last match of night 1. And perhaps being night 1, the crowd won't be as exhausted.
Mm,
So maybe it gets more of a reaction within the match. So I kind of leave that there. And The Undertaker and John Cena, I have fifth in with the Andre in between Roman and Brock. So maybe
mm,
in the middle of the card, Undertaker and Cena has a better chance, and I would give them more than 2.5 minutes. I understand why they did but that's just so disappointing. And the reason I have it fifth is because I continue that storyline through WrestleMania where John Cena's in the in the stands throughout the night. I would just move him around in spots
uh,
where he was maybe he's walking around backstage. He pops in behind the announce tables. So I would have a lot more fun with John Cena through night 1 into night 2, and I would have him kind of presented late on night 2, where we get the whole angle with Elias and everything else too. But I would just give them more time of a structure to kind of go out there and have a hopefully a little bit better match than what they got.
John Cena trying to find his path to WrestleMania was a fun storyline, and I think they could have done a lot more
Yeah.
with it, like you said. So let's fast forward to the final WrestleMania we got here is WrestleMania 35, where WWE said we're what would they say? We're in the outskirts of New York City or something like that, but we're actually in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So let's see how many matches we got here. Oh my,
Oh
we
boy.
have 16 matches here. Phew. All right. Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. So,
Buckle
Tony
up.
Nese defeated Buddy Murphy for the Cruiserweight Championship. Carmella won the Women's Battle Royal. Then we had Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder defeating the Revival for the Raw Tag Team Championship. Then you had Braun Strowman winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, last eliminating SNL Weekend Update host Colin Jost. Then let's go to the kickoff. Let's go to the first match on the card. Seth Rollins defeated Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship. AJ Styles defeated Randy Orton, a match where a portion of the crowd couldn't see the actual match because the lights were shining in the face of them, and that was a shame. And now we got an interesting match, the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match for the SmackDown Tag Titles. We had the Usos, Aleister Black and Ricochet, Rusev and Shinsuke Nakamura, and The Bar with the Usos winning. Then you had Shane McMahon defeat The Miz in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Then you had the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match for the women's tag titles with the Iconics defeating the Boss and Hug Connection, Nia Jackson, Tamina, and Beth Phoenix and Natalia. Then you had Kofi Kingston defeating Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship. You had Samoa Joe defeat Rey Mysterio by submission for the U.S. Championship in less than a minute. Then you had Roman Reigns defeat Drew McIntyre, Triple H defeating Batista in a no-holds-barred match. If Triple H lost, he would have had to retire from in-ring competition. Then you had the retirement match, Baron Corbin defeating Kurt Angle. Then you had the Demon Finn Balor defeat Bobby Lashley for the Intercontinental Championship. And then your main event, which is a winner-takes-all triple threat match for the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championships. You had Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, and Charlotte Flair, with Becky Lynch winning around midnight. So, this is our final one-day WrestleMania. And yeah, I'm very grateful it split to 2 nights. What were your thoughts on this WrestleMania compared to the ones we just talked about? Was it better? Was it in the middle? Or was it worse?
See, I think easily we got the best overall match from all the WrestleManias we've talked about so far with the Kofi Kingston Daniel Bryan match.
Agreed.
So from that aspect, yes, we got like the best moment and the best match. But we got the most bloat. Like, this is the third WrestleMania in a row that I've brought my kids and my family to, and definitely started to feel the fatigue of the WrestleMania sitting there and whatnot. So it's just like, oh boy, this is long in the tooth, so to speak. So from a bloat standpoint, this is definitely the peak, but we get the epic moment in the epic match. So this definitely feels like everyone's forced on the card, but there's so much depth on the card too that it's like interesting in a way too. So I don't know. I feel like we definitely hit the crescendo of like bloat.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask you something. Maybe it could have been possibly this way if they took the brand split more seriously. Do you think they should have done like a SmackDown WrestleMania and a Raw WrestleMania? Or do you think it's good that they always kind of mix it up for night 1 and night 2?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. I never really thought of that, Richie. My instinct was I like the mixed match. I like the flow of blending the two cards together, just because I don't know. I could definitely see a scenario where you would talk me into it, but my gut just tells me that I like the mishmash of the two Raw and SmackDown flowing, with kind of unpredictability of you don't know what's coming next.
Right. Now let's go to our night 1 opener and main event. What do you have opening the show, and what do you have closing the show for the night 1 WrestleMania?
All right, so this is definitely like the hottest take that I've had so far on this.
All right.
This is the culmination of the women's revolution, right? Like they got their Royal Rumble, they had their pay-per-view, but as you alluded to earlier in the podcast, main eventing WrestleMania is like the special be all end all. So I would highlight that by opening night 1 of WrestleMania with the women's battle royal, and have it be like a celebration of the women in a prelude to the night 2 main event spoiler. And I would say we're ending WrestleMania with the women, and we're closing WrestleMania with the women. Mm-hmm. And I felt that the opportunity to put all these women in the opener, and instead of going with the tag match, maybe would have meant more. And we can kind of reach back to history and throw past women in the battle royal too. And then we could kind of make it feel bigger and more prestigious too. So I would definitely go with the women battle royal opening night 1 of WrestleMania, just totally based off the book ending of the women revolution kind of coming to the culmination of the WrestleMania night 2 main event. So that's kind of why I came with that, spawned of a weird idea of the women's battle royal opening WrestleMania, which in hindsight, which isn't the hottest idea ever, but the meaning kind of is more impactful in my opinion.
I definitely see that perspective, just kind of celebrating all the women in WWE, and finally giving them their flowers, so to speak, for being a part of a company that wasn't really treating the women as, actual superstars. Go listen to the Unsung Divas episode with me and Chrissy Tina on the archives. But I have something a little bit different.
Yeah, I add one more of that to that, and I would just roll it out and have it be the Sensational Sherry Battle Royal.
Yeah, the Sensational Invitational. It writes itself.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, I would love that. And your main event, sir?
My main event for night one is an easy one in my opinion. It's Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan.
Hmm.
We talked about this whole time of hitting on night one WrestleMania main events, especially in real time where they really hit. So I continue that here. This is the best match that we've had the last 4 years, and even can you imagine this moment even being highlighted more closing a WrestleMania instead of in the middle of a card? So I think this is the easiest home run of a pick that we've had so far as a night one main event.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I had Kofi Kingston and Daniel Bryan as my night one main event. But for my opener, I actually had The Miz and Shane McMahon kicking it off with the Falls Count Anywhere match. Just some craziness just to wake up the crowd. The Miz versus Shane McMahon was actually a pretty hot feud at the time until they made The Miz
Yeah.
kind of look like a chump afterwards. And again, this is right before that odd 2 out of 3 falls era of WWE where every match was a 2 out of 3
Oh,
falls
God.
match. So the
For a
less we
week or
talk
for like
about that,
a month.
the
Yeah.
better. Let's move on to night two. What do you have opening? What do you have closing?
We still better get that George Mizanin spot with the fists and everything and opening up.
They sold shirts on it too, so hopefully long-term storytelling pays off.
All right. In night two, I am actually opening with the Universal Sprint. I keep it the same, and I go Brock versus Rollins. Initially, Brock and Rollins weren't supposed to open WrestleMania
Mhm,
35, but Brock said, "This doesn't work for me, brother. If I'm not closing, I'm opening."
mhm.
So Brock went out there and they said, "Hit my music," or whatever they did, or whatever power play he did. But I do that with night two.
Mhm,
I say you close night one with the WWE Championship, and then you open it with the Universal the next night. I think that
mhm.
just flows really well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd have that opening as well, the Universal, and then you close with the women. Now, looking at the rest of the card, a lot of these matches on paper look like an amazing WrestleMania card, and I'm surprised that besides the matches we just mentioned, they're not talked about more. Now, do you think it's just a case of everything was just so stacked that like if you're not in that high echelon like the Daniel Bryan Kofi Kingston match or that hype build that you kind of get lost in the shuffle because this had Roman Reigns' return singles match to WrestleMania after he announced his remission. You had Batista's final match. You had Samoa Joe's first WrestleMania. You had AJ Styles versus Randy Orton, which was the first time they were facing off. Seth Rollins finally getting a shot at the Universal Championship after not being in the main event quite as often. Do you think there's a case for why that is, or do you think everything kind of worked out the way it was supposed to be?
It's a weird era, really. It's a lot. It's like a transition era, and a lot. You get a lot of new NXT influx too.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like it's weird, especially with the continuous bloat. It's kind of hard to have highlights on the card when everything just continuously flows in a way too. So, like if we had Triple H and Orton, or excuse me, if we had Triple H and Batista, no holds barred, night two, like sixth on the card, like right after like the midpoint of the show, then it's probably highlighted better. They gives you a little bit more of a presentation. And if they cut off some of the bullshit and the laying around that they do and they have more of a sprint style, perhaps that's looked upon more fondly. Um and the same with the Roman in the McIntyre match. That was just a match that just flowed and it was totally forgotten about. It was just but also again, it's also a weird spot for Roman too, coming back from the cancer.
Hmm.
And he's just like, well, he's still the same Roman. It's like we still kind of are sick of him, but he just did have cancer, so we can't really boo him. So it was
Hmm.
very monotone and reactionless in a way.
Hmm.
So it's just like it's a weird transition of everyone on the card. So I don't know. It's there's definitely a lot of good in here, but the very good outweighs the kind of good in a way.
Hmm. Like there were great moments, you had Becky 2 belts, you had Kofi winning, and
Yeah.
then the kind of good things, yeah, you had Demon Balor pulling off a power bomb on Bobby Lashley. That was one of my favorite spots of the night that don't get talked about nearly as much. You even had Beth Phoenix return for the women's tag
Hmm.
team Fatal 4 Way. And all that kind of gets shifted under the rug because there were so many things going on at this period of time of just trying to fill out the card and trying to get as much on this card as possible. It's
Yeah.
almost like squeezing, like an orange or a lemon in your juice, and you're just trying to squeeze every last drop just to make
Hmm.
sure you don't need to use another lemon. And that's exactly what these WrestleManias felt like for a long time, where it's just like you're trying to squeeze the juice out of just like one thing until it's just you can't squeeze anymore. So you have to use another lemon in order to make your drink. So, out of all the WrestleManias we talked about, which one do you think would benefit the best from a 2-night WrestleMania, and which one do you think stomachs better on a night one WrestleMania rewatch?
I would say with the second question there, I think probably WrestleMania 33 stomachs the best because it kind of flows the best in a way. It not necessarily was hurt because you had a lot of highs and a lot of lows in WrestleMania 33, so I think that helps with the flow. But I think beneficial, I think WrestleMania 35 would have benefited the most from a 2-night WrestleMania, for so to speak. Like you forget that Hawkins and Ryder hometown moment where Kurt Hawkins finally ends his streak. That was a really good tag match with the Revival. It was an FTR special, but it was just stuck on the pre-show, and perhaps that would have got
Same thing with Tony Nese too. Yeah,
absolutely. You put those on each night and presented like third on the card, then perhaps you get more of a moment in it, more of a remembrance from it. Orton, they fixed the light. That's a pretty good first time matchup with AJ Styles. It would have been remembered pretty, better. Kurt Angle, Baron Corbin. I don't know. Maybe it's presented a little bit better on one night, but still, it's not really wanted. But instead of it being 10:30 on a oh my god, when's the main event going to happen kind of thing, maybe it's more accepted earlier on one of the nights. And then, of course, the Triple H match is definitely one that would have benefited from a 2-night structure, of course. So I think there would have been a lot more beneficial moments from WrestleMania 35 if they went 2 nights.
All right. Well, we went through all these WrestleManias. All these WrestleManias are fantastic. Now, I agree with you. Kofi Kingston, Daniel Bryan, probably out of all these WrestleManias that we talked about, was probably the best match if we were to combine all these into one WrestleMania. What would you think is the most disappointing match out of all these WrestleManias?
From an expectation standpoint leading in, or from a result that we got?
Your personal preference, if it's a result, if it's just the match wasn't up to snuff, if it's a combination of the two. Lay it on me.
Well, that's interesting. Well, can I take one from each maybe? And then at the end, I can kind of give you an answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so 32 is the Hell in the Cell or the main event with Triple H and Orton. I would say the Hell in the Cell just because it just
Triple
didn't need to be 30.
Triple H and Roman?
The Hell in the Cell, the Shane and the Undertaker. That probably just didn't need to be what it was. You get the awesome Shane return, and the Undertaker is so long in the tooth at WrestleMania that didn't really need to be 35 minutes, and it felt like it was the most disappointing in a way because Roman and Triple H at the end of the day had a good enough match, but Shane and Undertaker just really wasn't that. So I would say that's probably the most disappointing from 32. From a 33 standpoint, I would say the Orton Wyatt, the result, what we got there with the maggots, that just seems totally unnecessarily and very disappointing. Probably 34 would be the Undertaker John Cena thing where we got a pretty good build, and that's a dream WrestleMania match for sure. Perhaps we should have got that years and years earlier, but what we got was in a 2.5, 3-minute match just felt like you had disappointment after that 100%. And then from 35, a disappointment standpoint would probably be, this might be a hot take, but for the result of kind of the moment of the Becky and the Charlotte and the Ronda, like it's a good match and the moment's pretty good, but for building it up to like I talked about earlier, being the women's revolution kind of highlight, and we finally made a WrestleMania main event, and was Charlotte ham-fisted into this, and it should have been just Ronda and Becky, but they made the build work, and it was winner take all too, but it just felt that at midnight it was a little disappointing. It was sloppy. Charlotte was excellent in the match. She was the best worker in the match. I don't know if the moment was too big for Becky. She just felt like a step behind. And Ronda, unfortunately, felt totally checked out as it was her last match for like 2 years. So it just felt like that is a disappointment in a way, even though it was good.
All right, now we got the worst, the worst. I'm gonna put two, probably arguably combined all these WrestleManias, the best moment versus a best moment, and you're gonna say which one would you rather have happened, and we're gonna erase the other one from history. Are you ready?
Let's go.
All right, so Kofi Kingston winning the WWE Championship against the Hardy Boys return. One never happened. Which one are you taking and why?
Well, um, of course, the Kofi thing means more, but the Hardy moment, that's a really hard question. But the Hardy moment was incredible. Can I be controversial and I would erase Kofi just because 2019 TV coming out of it was so subdue, and then we get to erase that terrible finish with the Brock Lesnar. But
Wasn't
after
a,
the
it
Hardys
wasn't a
return,
finish, it was a match.
yeah, um, but the Hardys return, it peaked at WrestleMania 33, and we had a few decent fallouts afterwards with the Raw title. There was a few good matches afterwards too, but man, that moment was electric. That moment was all time. But it's hard to erase Kofi. I don't want to be controversial and say Kofi. I would fuck it. I would erase the Kofi moment just because him. It just felt like he deserved more coming out, more of a title reign coming out of it.
Mhm.
I felt like they weren't invested in him, and it's kind of like a poor man's Rey Mysterio run where it's just like, yeah, he's our champ. We gave him the moment at WrestleMania, but we don't really invest in him. We don't
Mhm.
really care about this. Um, it's like Kofi Mania was like a charge by the fans that we kind of got this, and then Vince gave us the moment, and then he was just kind of resented him as a champion, and they didn't really like. I like Kofi, and it was, I don't know, it's a hard question, Richie. So I guess I would erase Kofi just to be a little controversial.
It's all right. You gave me a soundbite that I can use, and then controversy creates cash. So we're all good here.
I like the heat. I'm a natural heel, anyways.
Well, it's like it's easier being a heel than being a face. So that's going to do it for this episode as we're wrapping up. Ryan, is there anything you want to plug more? Is there anything you want to talk about? Your final thoughts on anything? The floor, as they say, is yours.
Oh well, Richie. I would just say check out everything on the North South Connection. We have a pod. Our Podbean is where we get all of our podcasts. Our YouTube is kind of my baby in a way, that's where I kind of release all of my stuff for the most part. I don't really do anything podcast wise anymore, but I pretty much put all my energy on YouTube. Of course, check out the TikTok where we have the WrestleMania countdown. That's probably the most easiest way to catch up on the WrestleMania countdown. It's literally 40 to 55-second match reviews counting down all 402 WrestleManias down to one. Not sure when this is going to be released, Richie, but I assume we're going to be somewhere in the 40s or 30s. Geez, we are doing a WrestleMania performers countdown on YouTube. Richie, of course, is a part of that. So Richie was gracious enough to give us Eddie Guerrero, perhaps Cody Rhodes, and a few more counting down on the WrestleMania countdown, counting down all WrestleMania, the 40 best WrestleMania performers in WrestleMania history, match quality and performance and importance, and so on and so forth. And then if you are a fan of the Monday Night era, I would say check out the heartbeat of our network, which is the Monday Night Wars. Chad and JT does such a great job going through the Monday Night Wars and giving you a Raw and a SmackDown retrospect with all the things happening in the late 90s. So if you're a fan of wrestling, you were probably a fan of the late 90s and the Attitude Era, and those guys are doing a great job going through all those historical Monday Night Wars and the pay-per-views too. So that's the heartbeat of the network, and I would definitely recommend that.
Hell of a plug there, sir. It's almost like it's your first time doing it, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps, I guess.
Ryan, it's always great talking to you. It's always great talking shop about wrestling, and especially here with WrestleMania season. I can't wait to work more with you in the future, and I guarantee this is not the last time we're going to hear from you on Wrestling Retold and Relived, where you could listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And you could, again, follow us on the TikTok and the Instagram and the X or the Twitter, whatever you prefer. And now we're going to close it out. We're going to continue on WrestleMania month. We're still on that road to WrestleMania. Hopefully, Ryan and I will make it there unscathed, but you never know with the build coming in. Ryan, thank you so much. I am Richie Mars, TTFN, Tata for now, and we will see you later.